What's up, little flexers? Welcome back to the YouTube channel. Today we are going to go over the Vikavolt deck list that I used to place 67th out of 1,200 plus people in the Atlas Collectibles POG Championships. Now, I was really proud of this deck and the performance, and I will be uploading some of my games from the various rounds onto the YouTube channel. So if you don't want to know exactly like the round by round analysis, which I do at the beginning of the video, then click ahead to get to the analysis of the deck list. So it'll go in the beginning, I'll do, win-loss against this in round 1, round 2, round 3. And then at the end of the video, I go in and do an analysis. So if you want to watch, if you don't want it to be ruined for when I post the actual games to the YouTube channel, then skip ahead. But I was really happy with how this tournament went in terms of the deck choice, and I just love this deck. This is one of the best deck lists that I've created in a while, so I'm really happy to show it off to you guys on the channel. So this is the Vikavolt deck that I created and piloted for the POG Championships. So this was the list that I played in the Atlas Collectibles Pokemon Online Gaming Championships. It was, this 2-day tournament. First day was a qualifier into the second day, and in day 1 we went 7-2. I played this exact list. Now let me talk about what I was thinking about with this list heading into the tournament, because I had put a lot of thought into this list. If you guys have been following the stream for a while, you'll know that this was probably the deck that I played the most on stream. I gave, some reps to Scorch, which I hated. I did give some reps to Pikarom, which I had about as, I had a very similar list to the top list that Isaiah won, maybe like 3 cards off. But just wasn't finding a groove with that deck. Like, definitely could have seen myself playing Pikarom, but just didn't end up finding myself in a groove with that deck. And so we settled on Vikavolt just because Trainer Lock is the great equalizer here. Paralyzing Bolt is just an insane, filthy attack. Thank you so much for the follow, PokeRay90. Paralyzing Bolt is such an insane, filthy attack. And you can win matchups that you aren't supposed to win with Item Lock. So like things like Eternatus, you can win that matchup. It's a horrible matchup for you, but you can win it because you have Item Lock. If you can get a quick Item Lock, especially going second, you can lock them out of, playing down Crobats, using Quick Balls, Pokemon Communications, just basically getting set up. So Vikavolt, I just felt like had a lot of inherent strengths heading into like kind of a blind metagame. And I thought that it did have good matchups against Zacian-based decks, which I will still stand by. And we'll talk about that in a second. I thought that we would have been like, a mirror is kind of a coin flip, and I thought we could outplay the mirrors. Unfortunately, we weren't quite teched well enough for mirror, but that was more due to just like, I want to be as consistent as possible instead of trying to tech for things. And then I thought we had a pretty good Scorch matchup, which I'll talk about in a second. And then we just generally have like against like the fringe decks of the format, we have good matchups. The mill decks, the Mad Parties of the world, the Obstagoons. Like, you just kind of can beat a lot of these fringe decks that rely on items a lot to get set up. You basically take away their time in a way, right? Because like a deck like Obstagoon, and we played that in the last round of our day 1. Like a deck like Obstagoon, they need the time to set up, to get their quick balls in hand, to use their quick balls, to get out other basics. So they're just kind of like feeding you prizes here. But if you're taking away their ability to search out their other Pokemon, then you can really choke them out of being able to do too much. So overall, I was really happy with how the deck played, particularly in day 1. Day 1 matchups, we had round 1 Scorch. It was a greens Electrode Scorch, which was kind of wild. Yeah, I was not expecting that. My opponent, I think, made a little bit of a misplay. I think he popped his Electrode a little too early. And then he put all the energy onto the active that was already damaged. So I was able to super zap cannon. Hey, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Pokemon Fan Club. Oh man, thank you, Pokemon Fan Club. I really appreciate that. That rocks, bro. Thank you, thank you. So he used the electrode on the active, and that was already damaged because I had gotten 4 E-Power in my opening hands, and I just did Paralyzing Bolt for like 170, and then he evolved into the VMAX or something, and then he goes for the electrode on the active, and I was able to just super zap cannon, take away all his energy, and he's left with 1 VMAX, and then that was where we rolled from there. So I think if he had spread his energy to his benched VMAX, we might have had a harder time, but in any case, we got that win. Round 2, we played against a Vikavolt, and round 3, we played against a Vikavolt. This was best of 1. We split both Vikavolts. And then rounds 4, 5, and 7, we play against Mareep Mill. Okay? 4, 5, and 7. There were only 12 that I know of in our pod 2. And we played against 3 of them. So that's a quarter of like a very small subsection of decks. And that's why, you know, when you go to like a regionals, you want to pick a deck that is just generally good, in my opinion. Like that just can, like Vikavolt is a great equalizer. I'll say it again. Yo, thank you, Kevin, for the 300 bits. But you want a deck that just performs well across the board and is consistent, because you're going to run into these matchups that you don't even expect. Like, for instance, over the course of both days, I didn't hit a single Eternatus. And I knew that was a rough matchup, and I knew we could kind of cheese out of it with some item lock. And we'd definitely beaten it on the ladder before. But it's a hard matchup, and I didn't want to, you know, I wasn't excited if I was going to face an Eternatus. But we faced no Eternatus. It was like one of the top 3 decks played, faced none of it. And instead we played 3 Mareep Mill in day 1, which is like, how could you even guess? Like, that's like the hottest take to have said before the tournament that we would have faced 3 Mill decks in day 1. That would have just, you know, I would have gotten laughed off of tag team. But we did, so we won all 3 of those Mareep Mills. They came down to the end, you know, they came down to like, you know, having just a few cards left in deck, you know, 1 more turn for the Mill player, they would have won it, but just the combination of Judge and Marnie really got us there. We played an ADP in round 6, and they were able to get the turn 1 Altered Creation off. And that is just like worst case scenario for Vikavolt, since you are just attacking with, you know, things that Zacian can one-shot. You know, you're going to have a hard time against an ADP that gets the turn 1 Altered Creation off going second. So that's, you know, probably the deck's worst matchup is ADP that does get the Altered Creation. Now, if they don't get the Altered Creation, you have a pretty winnable matchup. It's back and forth. There are some tricks that you can do. You can pull up their bench sitters, get them stuck with Absol and things like that. But yeah, very, very interesting and dynamic ADP matchup. We play in round 8 a Blissey. That is one of our viewers and or records. Won that one just through being able to snipe down their Porygons. And then round 9, we played a really intense game against Obstagoon. So if you want to see those matchups, you can go on the YouTube. I will be posting them over the course of the next week or so. Everything that we played. Heading into round 2, or day 2. So we had made it into day 2 with a 7-2 record. Going into day 2, first round we played ADP, where we went win, loss, win. ADP, again, tough matchup, pretty even, I would say. It just depends if they start ADP, and if they do, it can be really tough. And if they start ADP, and you generally want to go second, I think, because getting the item lock is pretty important. But it depends on how good their start, depends on how many quick balls they have, how much access to ADP they can get, and if they can get an energy down on the ADP. Round 2, we played against Centiskorch. We won 2-1 there in that matchup. Pikarom, we played in round 3. We lost, but it was super tight. It was extremely tight. Came down to the last prize in both of the games. Round 4, Centiskorch, another, you know, 2 wins. And I think Centiskorch was the major headache for me, or like confusion for me, throughout the course of the entire tournament, because going in, I thought Sentinel was a bad deck and that it, really shouldn't be seeing any play in comparison to something like Eternatus. I just felt like Eternatus was the better or VMAX attacker, And for some reason, Sentinel made its presence felt. I played 3 Sentinel. It was easily the matchup that I played the most outside of ADP, which I played also 3 times, I believe. And so, yeah, it just felt interesting that Sentinel was so well played and just didn't perform. Oh, I played ADP 4 times. Yeah. It's just interesting that Sentinel was so well played. But just didn't, no top 8s for Sentinel. I think it was overrated extremely by the general player base. Round 5, another Vika Mirror. They were teched for Mirror. We ended up playing this same exact list twice. So we played in round 5 and then in round 9 of day 2. It was the same list. What they had in their list was like perfect for Mirror. They had 1 Mallow and Lana. And then they also played Eldegoss, so they could recycle the Mallow and Lana. And then they also played Cynthia and Caitlyn, so they could recycle the Mallow and Lana. And Mallow and Lana is just a big, big card in that matchup, as is Gust as well. So they could recycle, their boss's orders, their Mallow and Lanas, depending on what they needed at the time. And that was just really rough. We tried to go a few different strategies over the course of the games. And they had Toughness Cape as well, which is a big tech against the Mirror, because it means you can't go Paralyzing Bolt into a Super Zap Cannon. You have to go Paralyzing Bolt into Super Zap Cannon. That gives them one more turn to find their Mallow and Lana, and then if they can do that, they can lock you out of, getting those combos. Thank you for the follow, Nate Doge and Sham Dodie. Thank you so much. We move on down. We played a Luke Metal Z list, a very close Luke Metal, but the problem is that they do have to drop things on their bench that are not Zacian, and we played a Tool Scrapper in our list. So we were able to knock off any of their damage reduction tools, be it metal goggles or their, metal frying pans. If you can do a Tool Scrapper, knock off at least 2 of those tools, or 1 in the right situation, then you're totally fine in that matchup. You do have to overextend to knock out the Luke Metal, right? You have to break the item lock for 1 turn. But if you can break the item lock for 1 turn and include it with a Marnie or a Judge, then usually the Luke Metal player doesn't have what it takes to build up a Zacian on the bench. And then even if they do, you could potentially just one-shot that Zacian depending on if they get a pan down or not. So that's a pretty tough matchup, but I think, again, an early item lock works wonders against that deck, especially if they don't start Luke Metal. And then in round 7, we play a kind of mixed combination. They tried to do both. They played 1 ADP and 1 Luke Metal. So depending on, what they were expecting to hit, they would go either the ADP route or the Luke Metal route. That was another 2-0 win. And so we're feeling good. We're 5 and 2 at this point. And I'm thinking, okay, I have an outside shot to, make top 32, potentially make top 16 if I win 2. But we're looking like, okay, top 32 is pretty reasonable. We can win the next 2, maybe make it into top 16. But we go against an ADPZ in round 8, which might have been the first game, might have been the hypest game of the entire tournament. It was absolutely unbelievable. It came down to them. It came down to me using Dedenne to Tingly Return. And I got the Paralyzation. They did not have a switch. And so I was able to, knock out their active for the last few prizes. The next couple games didn't go so well. Game 2, I think I just dead drew pretty hard. And then game 3, it was just back and forth. And they were able to get a GX attack off, and I couldn't really respond. Round 9, we played again against that same Vikavolt mirror that I was talking about earlier. Had a really rough time. I think we took 1 game, maybe the first game off of them. And then the next 2 were pretty tough. I remember game 2, we dead drew pretty significantly and just conceded on turn 3. And then the last game was back and forth, but they had just enough resources to take the KO. That was really another stellar game if you want to look back and look at kind of this format's Vikavolt mirror and how dynamic that can be. So that was that. Let's talk about the list here just briefly. We have ultimate consistency. This list is built around doing certain things very, very well. So you want to get the turn 1 item lock, okay? That is of utmost importance. So I built the list to do that as often as possible. You see the 4 Vikavolt extremely important. I mean, obviously, I don't think you would play a Vikavolt with less than 4, but you could definitely, some people would certainly think like, well, do I need 4 attackers? And like, yes, the answer is yes. Jirachi is probably our second best starter. I mean, you could start Jirachi or Vikavolt, really. Either of those, you're like sitting pretty for the rest of the game. But Jirachi, Stellar Witch to facilitate a lot of your items. You really don't need like 2 Jirachi. So the ideal board position for Vikavolt is to just have 1 Jirachi, because generally speaking, the opponent's not going to target a Jirachi down. So you're oftentimes quick balling and great balling for Jirachis to discard them later on, or to put them at the bottom of your deck with Marnie. But the Jirachi is awesome just to get those turbo patches in like the mid to late game, or like dig for the Electro Powers or the specific supporter that you need in that late game. We have 1 Marshadow. This is so that you can bump any chaotic swells. You really only need 1 Stadium, the Thunder Mountain, and so you want to be able to use that effectively. So Marshadow just does that, and can also bump things late game like Wonder Lab. We did do that one time against a Centiskorch player. I was talking about the ideal board position. Yes, okay. So you usually want to have 1 Jirachi, and that's it. So don't be like playing, there are some other decks, like I think ADP could get away with playing like 2 Jirachis down. You don't want to do that, generally speaking, with Vikavolt. You want to have 1 Jirachi, 2 Vikavolts that you're trying to power up on the bench, and then you're going to have your Absol usually, like 80% of games you want to get Absol down. And then you'll have 1 open slot for either Marshadow or Tapu Koko. And then you'll usually be using, 2 Dedenne or a Dedenne and a Crobat, or just have that 1 open slot for the end of the game to be able to Dede change. And so that is the ideal. You don't want to clog your bench with Jirachis. I see a lot of players go in and they have their Jirachi active and they like immediately bench another one. That's not the way you want to go. Just 1 Jirachi is perfectly acceptable. If the opponent targets down Jirachi, that's just going to make it harder for them, because then they're playing a 7 prize game, which I think feeds into Vikavolt's power. The thing about Vikavolt is actually the item lock is a means to an end. The item lock is so that you can work up to get enough Vikavolts in play with enough energy to go Super Zap Cannon game. So the thing about that, I think, is some people like, oh yes, I need to get the item lock and I need to maintain that the whole game. That's not necessarily the case. This is the perfect deck that would teach you about tempo and pacing, because you go item lock until you don't need to anymore, and then you can, I call it opening up the floodgates. If you were watching the streams, you go Super Zap Cannon, sometimes like 3 Super Zap Cannons in a row. You're just one-shotting things left and right with E-powers and finishing the game off that way. Vikavolt, a very potent attacker. That second attack is absolutely amazing, and everything that this deck needs. So those are the Pokemon. We have the trainers here. I felt like 1 Tool Scrapper was absolutely necessary, particularly for the Luke Metal matchup. So Lucario Melmetal is a tough matchup if you can never get rid of their pans. So I felt like that was going to be enough of a factor, and we did see a couple of them in the tournament. So this was very validated, and also had extremely good use in the mirror to knock off their toughness escapes. We didn't have a great record in the mirror because our list wasn't teched for mirror. I wasn't actually expecting that many people to play Vikavolt, and I was a little bit wrong on that. There were certainly not a lot of people playing Vikavolt. I think it was the number 4 represented deck, but the people that did play Vikavolt and that we played against were very teched for mirror, and we just didn't have really any tech outside of maybe the Tool Scrapper and just like our general consistency to beat the mirror. So in facilitating that turn 1 item lock, we do have 4 turbo patches. You could go like a Guzmahala version of this deck, but I like the turbo patches for really any point in the game. It's basically, I said this on stream a lot, we need to hit the patch. And that's really true in a lot of cases, but we play the max count so that we're more able to really just hit like 1 patch a game. That's all it feels like it needs. You got Tapu Koko for acceleration. You got Thunder Mountain. If you played at the right time, you get that extra energy boost. And so 4 turbo patches, you really just need to hit 1, maybe 2. It's not like you're ever relying on hitting like 4 of them, but they're really good early game to get the paralyzing bolt on the first turn if you happen to start a Vikavolt, and they're pretty amazing last game to get Vikavolts with enough energy to, Super Zap Cannon repeatedly. We have the ball engine here. 4 quick ball is what I see in a lot of lists, and I think that's fine. 4 quick ball, just going for a quick ball is fine. But what I found to be of just incredible consistency boost was the addition of Great Ball. I loved Great Ball. I would not cut down to 0 Great Ball. I could see myself cutting down to 1 Great Ball, but this Great Ball basically is just to get out your Vikavolts. It basically read, find a Vikavolt in your deck, and that's really all I used it for. It was awesome sometimes when you needed a Dedenne, if you had some options or something. It was cool if you drew like a couple of Pokemon, you can make some decisions, but it was really just for getting out the Vikavolts, because sometimes I felt like quick balls needed to be used for Dedenne, and so especially in the early game, and so you wouldn't have the quick balls to get out Vikavolts, and you were relying on just like the draws to get the Vikavolts out. Well, not so much with the Great Balls. We have 4 Switch with Jirachi, I think that's correct, and then the 2 Escape Board again with Jirachi there. We got 3 Boss's Orders. I would love to have had 4, but maybe we could consider including like an Eldegoss or something. We have 4 Research, which is awesome. You just want as much draw as you can with a deck like this, because again, if you can cheese them out in the early game, you have a really great shot at winning. So now we come to the most interesting part, at least in my opinion, of this deck, and that is the full count of Marnie and 1 Judge. So my idea behind Judge was that I wanted more Marnies in the deck, but you can only play 4. So what's the next best card? Well, there's Judge, and there's actually some benefit to using Judge over Marnie. So if you have a card in your hand that you actually want to redraw, like let's say an Electropower or an Energy, then in that case, Judge might be better for you while still also disrupting the opponent. So Judge to me was a great card. I might, cut it if I were to play this list again in any tournament, but that was the reasoning there. And really what you want to do, again, we had a very, very good record against ADP Z or just generally Zacian based decks. So let's see, we went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, 2, 7. I mean, we went positive. So we went 7-4 in games against Zacian decks. And that's because if you, can hinder them with their Intrepid Swords and get something stuck in the active, then you're in a really good spot, right? So you just want to be able to Marnie, especially in those early game turns, you want to Marnie like every turn to kind of mitigate the advantage that they would get off of the Intrepid Sword. Last but not least is the Energy. I think you could probably cut down to 7 Energy, although having 8 is really nice because they're probably the best quick ball targets in the early game. Just so that you can get your Coco ready to go early if you need it. And then 4-Speed Lightning really just smooths everything out in terms of draw. It's an awesome, awesome card for this deck that you wouldn't want to go down in count 2. So that is Vikavolt. If I were to play this deck again, the changes that I would make would be to minus a Great Ball and minus a Judge or a Marnie and add in 1 Reset Stamp. I feel like that is absolutely warranted. 1 Reset Stamp and 1 probably Mallow and Lana. That was the card that we missed the most, I think, particularly in the mirror. But this would be my updated list. I think we really wanted Reset Stamp for the times that we went, Boss's Orders, and then Reset Stamp, and then tried to item lock. I think we missed that a lot. It would have helped us in mirror a little bit too if they go Super Zap Cannon, because then we could play a Draw Supporter and then Reset Stamp them as well in the same turn. If you're looking for more room, say you want to fit in Toughness Capes or something like that, I think your best bet would be to go either an Escape Board, cutting an Escape Board, or cutting an Energy. But other than that, this is just a list that, aside from a few personal card changes, I think is the perfect way to build Vikavolt. So thank you for watching this outline of the Vikavolt deck, and I'll catch you on another video.